Guys, there's great lessons that you learn in life, and there's nothing in life like getting out there and doing it. And my father used to talk about this. He would call it the price of an education. My father did not go to college. So he would get into some business stuff and it didn't always go well, but he'd come home and he'd tell my mom, he'd go, yeah, but I'm paying for my education. I didn't spend 200 grand on a degree. So I'm taking that money I would have given to a fancy university and I'm now putting it in the workplace, but this is how I learn. And I just share that with you because it was something that I used to hear around the house a lot, price of an education. But boy, was my dad right. There is nothing quite like just jumping in and doing something. And I will reflect back of some of the great nights or moments that I had in this sport. And I don't mean from a point of glory for learning something. Whoa, I just learned something. I would take it with me. I had a great night, guys, 2005. I was working with the Oregon State Athletic Commission. I was an assigned inspector. So my level of participation, I had on the Oregon State Athletic, I had this special shirt on and I got the special lanyard. So I came in through the back doors, but it was at the Rose Garden, Khabib Mitchell versus an up and coming boxer by the name of Floyd Mayweather. And this was, I should tell you, because it's relevant to his career, this was Pretty Boy Floyd. Do you guys remember Pretty Boy Floyd Mayweather? Not Money Mayweather. Pretty Boy Floyd Mayweather, when he still couldn't get attention. He hadn't broken out yet. And Khabib Mitchell, not for nothing, might have been the bigger name on that card. Khabib Mitchell was a former world champion. Floyd was an up-and-comer. Year was 2005. So I get assigned to Floyd's locker room. And the only job that I have to do is to watch him from the time he reports until he goes to the ring. I cannot take my eyes off him. That if he was to go to the bathroom, if he was to strip naked and change, I have to watch Floyd. At some point in there, they're going to wrap his hands. Nothing could go on his body. Nothing goes into his system, right? So this is my role. So I'm just sitting in the locker room with Floyd. Now, Floyd had 3 kids in the room. There wasn't one of them that was over 14, and I don't know how young they were. They could have 12, 11. He had 3 kids in the room, and one of them had, and this was when, we're still telling you the times, right? With ghetto blasters, remember those? You carry them in, they have 2 big speakers, and there's like a cassette tape in the middle. And one of them's whole job is Floyd would put this tape in, move to track 3, put this tape in, and this kid would just keep on changing music. Floyd would say, turn it up, turn it up. Now, this is for hours. And Floyd is just sitting on this chair. He never gets up. Guzman was the promoter of this event, and it was written in Floyd's contract. They were on HBO, and Floyd would make his walk at exactly 7:52. He was to leave the locker room at 7:52. The window went live at 8 o'clock, and the opening shot is going to be Floyd walking out. So they're going to remove him from the locker room at 7:52, and they're going to put him behind the curtain at 7:57. And this is written in a contract, and Floyd had better be on his marks because we're going live around the world. Now, I don't know any of this stuff. I don't have any idea that that's written into a contract. I don't think about the TV side or the business side of things. This is a straight adjudication that's going to take place in a 17 by 17 ring under the Queensberry's rules at the discretion of the Oregon State Athletic Commission. I don't know that this is a business and there's a show. I don't know that there's cues and there's marks. I don't know about this lights, camera, action. So it was this major introduction I got, but it came with one crowning moment, which was all of the headlines of how many tens of millions of dollars Floyd Mayweather made. I was in the locker room when they brought him his biggest check at that time, highest paid guy on the card that night. It was $4.5 million. The relevance to the $4.5 million, okay, and the difference between Floyd and everybody else who has priced themselves out of having a job is Floyd publicly said it was $25 million. He publicly told the media of the tens of millions of dollars. He publicly told people, but he accepted a much more reasonable deal. Why? Because that was fair and that's what could get done. And Floyd knew there's a mark. This isn't, let me just say, some crazy amount. This is a sport that I want to compete in. I need people to set this up. I need somebody to fight with me. All of them deserve to be paid. So let's do something that's fair. And that's how Floyd did business, which is why Floyd still fights to this day. Now, the only thing more embellished than Floyd Mayweather's purses are Floyd Mayweather's pay-per-view numbers, but that's okay. It's a story, and he still gets to walk out there and be part of it. And when I do juxtapose Floyd against the other guys who price themselves out of the sport, there's one difference. Floyd still has a job, and they don't. And you could go back as far as you want. You could go back to when they needed somebody to fight Klitschko, and Lennox Lewis pipes up and says, I'll do it for $100 million. That's the same thing as saying, no, I don't want to fight Klitschko. It's the exact same thing. No business leader hears, hey, Lennox is interested at $100 million. Let's get him in and start negotiations. They're going to look at him, he doesn't want to do the fight. Same with everybody else who ever tries to price himself out of a fight. It's a perfectly fair, and it's the brave way of getting out of a very hard job that you didn't want to do in the first place. But there is no exceptions to the rule. We're seeing this in reverse done with Khabib. Somebody's offering Khabib $100 million to box. Khabib is making a point. I don't want to do this anymore. It's not about the money. It was never about the money. You're not going to get me for the $100 million. You're not going to get me for $100. And if there's ever a day that I want to go out and do the sport, the price also won't stop me. I'll show up and I'll do the sport. It's very honorable. It's very sincere and it's very honest, but it's also Khabib telling us, I just don't want to do this anymore. And the rest of us having to show him respect and saying, okay, we understand. But I can read the same articles today about Khabib turning down $100 million as I read one on Chuck Liddell earlier today. Well, Chuck will box enough, I can't remember who the opponent was, if they want to pay him enough money. Well, nobody wants to pay you enough money. And nobody wants to watch you fight if you're only doing it for the money. It's one of the reasons that pricing yourself out is so effective if that's what you don't want to do. If you want to get out of going and doing this, very easy, just throw a number. So when I'm seeing Chuck do this, I don't fault Chuck. Chuck missed the entertainment era. He missed it completely. Guys like me would drive Chuck Liddell a purist, make him sick to his stomach, right? At the same time, if Chuck's coming out and saying, I'll do it for X price, that price doesn't exist. Let me stop you right there. There's no promoter that needs you or anybody else enough to start paying money that's not going to be sustainable and cost them their business. And there's no real fans. And I know that's a broad stroke, but for the purpose of broad strokes, fans don't want you in there if the reason you're in there is for the pay. They want you in there for the reasons that they all got behind Khabib, by example, which is he wanted something out of it. He wanted competition. He wanted legacy. He wanted to prove his point against this person. They wanted conflict resolution, and we all go home. And I only share this with you because many people read the blueprint that Floyd Mayweather put out. I was there personally. I was there in a private moment. What Floyd made that night is not my business to tell you guys. It's been 16 years. I'm telling you guys. When Floyd fought Sean Bay Mitchell, I was there. I saw his check was $4.5 million. I saw SportsCenter that night. And I read the headlines in the paper the next day. And those stories and those headlines will not reflect what I'm sharing with you to be a fact, but it's also a reason that Floyd's still around. Floyd went over to Japan and fought a gentleman, Tension, I can never say this guy's name, Tension, for $8 million. He did that like 2 years ago. It took Floyd about 25 seconds. He grabbed $8 million, took a private jet from Tokyo, and went right back to Las Vegas. But that was a very reasonable price to go in to a different country and fight a guy who you outweigh by 15 pounds, which is a big size advantage. 15 pounds at 140 pounds, that's a meaningful size advantage for Floyd. Oh, and by the way, this Tension, who I'm talking about, had never boxed before. So a very small guy who's never done it is going to take on Floyd. How much money do you want for that? So Floyd came out and he talked about the 80 million and he talked about the 100 million, but behind closed doors, he agreed to do a job at a pretty hefty rate. 8 million to fly over against a guy who'd never done it before. I mean, right, do you understand the point? But there is a business in the way that Floyd does business. Most obviously that Floyd continues to do business. He continues to. Other guys try to read the playbook. They think that they understand and they price themselves out of a market and they end up not fighting again. That could be Lennox Lewis. It could be the comment, I'm not trying to kick our own Chuck Liddell, but it could be the comment that Chuck had just made. It could be what John Jones is going through. There's a number of ways, honorably, to get out of doing something that you don't want to go and do. And in this space, pricing yourself out seems to be number one. It's just one that the fans and audience have accepted. You could even get some of the media to go along with you. Well, they should have paid him. I mean, right? You can get a little bit of run for your no, I don't want to do it approach within this sport. But there is a difference in the guys who continue to do it. I'm just bringing you this one example. One example, 2005, old Chael had a job to do. I'm watching Money May. But the check that I saw him accept versus the headlines were different. And there's a brilliance in that. There's a simplicity in it. There's something simple about embellishment. I understand that. But of all the names that I just dropped for you, one of them is still employed.